This is a brief presentation on the elements of effective writing. These are things that you will want to incorporate into your writing. All writing can be effective when it's done this way. So, the five main traits of effective writing, you want to have an essay or a piece of writing that demonstrates a strong focus or purpose, which we've talked about before. You want to have a nice organizational pattern. You want to use support and elaboration in your paragraphs to prove the things that you have to say to support the ideas that you're putting forth. You want to use a proper style or a memorable style, something that demonstrates who you are, sort of conveys your voice. And you also want to use the appropriate grammatical conventions. For a focus or purpose, you want to think about the topic or the subject of your essay. You want to make sure that you know the topic, that you have studied it, researched it, that you understand it, and you have to make sure that it's clear, focused, and specific in its delivery to the person, to your audience. It needs to be a worthwhile topic. No one wants to be bored to tears about anything, so try to find a topic that can be interesting to a reader, to your audience. If you know your audience, you may know how to deliver it in a way that it will be interesting. Sometimes we have topics that we're assigned, or we have things that we have to do that doesn't have the same level of interest as others. So if it's something that we're not interested in, if it's a topic that seems a little dull or boring, then you need to find a way to spice it up to make it more interesting. Think about ways of delivering it that will appeal to your reader, appeal to the audience, because you always want your reader to be engaged, and you never want the reader to be confused. If once the reader becomes lost, the reader stays lost. So you don't want to do that. You want to keep them focused and engaged in what you have to say. When we talk about organization, you want to have a steady progression of the essay. You want to know the components and how you want to deliver them, how you want them presented. It needs to be a clearly introduced topic. You have to have good support, and you have to have a good conclusion that does more than just restate the thesis or restate what the beginning of the paper was. There needs to be a reason for us moving through the paper. Your paper has to have some worth or some merit to it, and it needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay? And the progression of your ideas, they need to be clear and logical in the way that you deliver them. When you're using support and elaboration, you want to have a proper extension and development of the topic or subject. And what that means is you want to go beyond just giving one brief point about the topic. You want to develop the idea. You want to make sure that it works. You want to prove that it works through a more thorough discussion. You need to elaborate. Okay? Everything you say needs to be directly related to the topic or the thesis statement. Anything that diverges from the thesis really doesn't belong in your paper anyway. Okay? You need to your support and elaboration. Everything must be sufficient if it's going to fully explore the topic or subject. And the amount of what you offer is not as important as the power. You can write an essay where you provide 500 examples, but if they're dull examples and they really don't hold a lot of meaning, or if they all mean the same thing, you're not accomplishing much. You can't beat someone to death with credibility, with that ethos that we've talked about in a prior lesson. What you want to try to do is use the things that are most powerful, use the examples, the evidence that are most powerful, and that becomes more effective. And you're always going to be, you'll always find that you're more effective when you use concrete, specific details. You don't want to repeat yourself over and over again. You don't want to use the same ideas again and again. And you don't want to present ideas that aren't developed. You have to be sure, remember that, your support and evidence needs to be thoroughly developed. Now, when we're talking about style just means you have a good control of language that's appropriate to the purpose and the audience and the context or the occasion. Those are the things we've talked about in a prior presentation as well. But the control of language, the appropriateness of it, you want it to convey your voice or your personality, but you also want to do it in the proper setting, the proper environment. Think about who your audience is. If your audience is classmates, then you may have a more relaxed, a less formal style of delivery than you would if you were delivering it, say, to someone who's going to be a future boss or someone who is your professor or some authority figure. You just have to kind of think about who it is you're speaking to or you're writing to, and that will help guide the type of style that you use. You want to use the proper vocabulary. You know, there may be words that you can use colloquial or street language if you're talking to your friends, but you wouldn't use that for formal writing, so you want to avoid doing that. And you want to have fluent sentences that have a variety of sentence styles. You know, if every sentence is written subject, verb, object, you know, very basic, blunt sentences, it looks choppy and it makes your writing lack the style that it needs. You know, the more variety you have in your sentences, you know, you don't want every sentence to have the same amount of words. You don't want every sentence to have the same format. Like I said, subject, verb, object. You want to vary it, change it up a little bit. When you do that, you create your own style, and it develops a voice for you as a writer. And that's something that becomes almost like a fingerprint. You know, it's like you can read some people's essays, and you just know this is by that particular person, that particular writer. Those are the things you want to work on. And when we talk about conventions, what we're talking about there is just the correctness in usage, grammar, and mechanics. You want to write correctly and properly. Also, if you have a lot of errors, it's going to impede the reader's understanding of the ideas that you're trying to convey. You know, when you make mistakes and when you have little surface errors, a bunch of those add up and people start tuning out because they get so bogged down in trying to understand what you're really trying to say, because you're not saying or writing it correctly, because you're not using the proper forms of grammar, the proper English usage or mechanics. And you want to avoid that, and that's why you want to brush up on any grammar errors or any grammar problems, punctuation problems that you might have.